Hi, everyone. Happy Tuesday. Kate is on her way. We are jumping from one call to the next. I'm sure. I'm sure you're used to that life too. There she is. Hi, Kate. I was just letting them know
Hey.
we're jumping from one place to the next. So,
Yep. And while we're getting people, folks are getting logged in, I'm just going to refill my water really quick.
yep, take your time. We are good. Okay. Everybody had a good week so far? I won't do the obligatory weather chat because I know it's so different everywhere, but hopefully spring is coming for you. All right, we'll get here started here in just a second. Oh, while we're waiting on Kate, I did wanted to do a quick apology and say I'm sorry that some of you this today was such a last minute add to the meeting. I've been checking the registration and it's a manual process to get them added to the meeting. And for some reason, this last group from the last week or so didn't get added in. So apologies if you were waiting and you're like, oh, wait, there's that. Where's that meeting? So I'm glad you made it. If anyone is listening to this recording after I send it out today, and you weren't able to make the call today because of the last minute ad, I am so sorry. That is all on me. You're on mute, Kate.
Oh,
Hello.
now you can hear my voice.
I can hear your voice. I can see your screen. All is good.
Wonderful. All right. Well, we are going to go ahead and get started because we have a lot of wonderful content to review today. So, as a reminder, we're going to keep the phone lines muted as we're going through the webinar today. There is going to be a discussion point at the end that will take people off of mute and hopefully be able to dialogue back and forth and have some really hopeful, rich conversations around this topic. And just checking we're recording. All right, Grace, let's go ahead and let's get started. So thank you all for joining today. Our topic today for the webinar is focused on enhancing customer lifecycle management through this concept of automation. We are going to dig into quite a bit of content, and I'm excited to hear your thoughts on the topic. For the rest of the webinar, I'm going to go off of video just so we can focus primarily on my slides and content. I actually do have a few resources that I'm going to be bringing up as well, so I want to make sure I have full screen for all of that content and information. In today's session, we are going to discuss one, the significance of automation. It is very timely and where we are today in the current state of tech, and something that we're hearing more and more from our customers that we work with of needing to leverage their tech stack to scale and to automate. So we're going to talk about why that's happening today and a little bit more of the importance of it. We'll also talk through strategies for implementing automation across the customer lifecycle, as well as look at a few specific examples. These examples are primarily going to be relevant for or very specific to Gainsight, but I don't want that to deter anyone who is not a Gainsight customer, because whatever your tech stack is, there is going to be some way that you would be able to do a very similar process. So that's one thing I wanted to note. And then we'll also discuss different tools and strategies to help you get started. We truly believe here at nCloud of ensuring that, what we share as practices, we're also trying to make it tactical, something you can walk away with, something tangible that you can start to leverage and put into place at your organization. So we have some documents and things that you'll be able to use in thinking through this concept. All right, so let's get started. Who on this call has heard this phrase, oh, probably over the past 2 to 3 years? Raise your hand. I know Grace has her hand raised because she knows. All right, many of you, and I was expecting that is what I was going to see, because everywhere in CS we are hearing about this concept of do more with less. And a few of these slides, I actually presented a session at Pulse last year, and I love this phrase because to me, this sounds really negative of, you're asking me to do more, put more on my plate, and how am I going to do that? And that feels stressful. And one of my favorite memes to go along with this concept is, how does that make you feel? It makes you feel like the dog in the burning room. One of the most loved memes on the internet, or probably top memes on the internet. Everything's fine, but it really isn't fine. And I don't think when that phrase, came to fruition, that that's what it was really meant to mean is, right, we got to put more on your plate. We can't add people. So now we need to figure out who can do it. What it really means is we need to leverage our technology and the skills that we have within our team to make us more efficient, because we don't want our teams feeling like the dog feels, like everything's burning around them. We want to feel like we have a plan and a purpose, and that we can leverage our time as a CSM wisely, as a CS operations lead wisely, to achieve all that we want to set out to achieve. This is an article it's actually an older article, but it's one that I really like just because of the content and the focus is around this concept of making time for work that matters. And imagine if we replaced that slide that I had in the beginning that was do less with more. And instead it said, make time for work that matters. Because what we really are trying to say is when we look at our CS organization, we need our people to spend time on the activities that we need them to spend time on and the things that matter. And we need to evaluate everything else as a possible automation opportunity, or where can I tech stack help in automating some of this functionality or capabilities so that our team doesn't have to be the ones to deliver it or spend time on it. Now, this could mean across your customer lifecycle. This could be looking at automation in different types of segments. It could be a lot of things. But most importantly, what we want our team to focus on is what are the things that matter that are going to help you achieve your goals. And their goals are probably something around ensuring their customers renew and trying to identify different expansion capabilities or opportunities to be able to grow the business. I have this article, again, this is from Harvard Business Review, and I have the article linked there for anyone who wants to read it. But it also is a very foundational concept of trying to look at your to-do list and identify the things that are going to make the most impact and focus on those things. So in order to get or allow our CS organizations to do that, we need to give an alternative for the things they didn't highlight. Well, how are we still need to do those things? Probably. Maybe we don't. Maybe it's an evaluation of actually we don't need to do that anymore. But for the things that we do need to do, how are we going to do that? Last week or a few weeks ago, the weeks kind of jumbled together, but recently we did a webinar on this topic of operationalizing outcomes. And so in that webinar, we talked about that in our CS ops work, it's so important for us to be able to not just dig into our technology and start configuring things because somebody wants something to do something. We need to be approaching CS operations with a plan of the outcomes that we want to achieve, and then creating these plans of how we're going to operationalize that within our tech stack. And so this was a slide that I came up with of an example of a customer where we were developing out, like, what is our strategy going to be from a CS ops perspective? What is our focus? That's what you see in that focus column. Improve customer retention, scale CS activities to improve efficiency, migrate a product over to a new solution that we have, and expand in a specific product area. Why are we doing that is really important, because we need to understand the why, so we get the buy-in for the team, and we understand why we're going to start doing things within our technology stack to make this happen, or why we may say, here's a new workflow for you to follow. There's a purpose behind it. But one of the biggest things I wanted to point out here is this outcome is on so many of our customers' planning for 2024. And that is, we need to scale CS activities to improve our efficiency. And I'm sure many of you on the call, or how about we do this? Let's raise our hands. Who has an outcome that's focused around needing to scale CS activities and improve efficiency? All right, we've got Katie, we've got one. Who else is focused on that? No one else? All right, we've got other folks, which is what I was thinking. We all are trying to do this. So we know that one, CS teams feel overwhelmed. That's what we saw with the everything is fine dog in that meme. But we're lacking automation, or we might have the automation and the tech capability, but we're lacking a strategy of how to make it happen. We might not necessarily have segmentation in place, or segmentation that is working. So that needs to be reevaluated. And overall, we just need to improve the tech stack adoption. A lot of companies are evaluating their tech stacks right now of what should stay, what should go, how could we make the most of what we have. So that is today, and that is what's happening. So I'm hopeful that some of these activities and just strategies will help you think, and it's not dependent on one technology or another. It's really about how you're going about evaluating your customer lifecycle and your strategy around it. All right, moving on. So this concept of automate with intention. We all probably on this call have skill sets and technology that can help us automate. So we have the tools in our toolbox to be able to automate. But how do we automate with intention? And when I say that, it's just really this thought process on, or a mindset that we don't want to automate everything. We want to be very intentional of what we're automating. Being able to evaluate across the team of what do we need the team, the CSMs to focus on, what should we or shouldn't we evaluate as an automation possibility. And automation should be segment agnostic. And this should be a theme for 2024, because no longer do we see this concept of we have a segment that is just digital and then everything else is human driven. I actually don't think that exists today. In our world in tech, every segment has some layer of automation. And really it's about, how loud is the automation volume, which is what you're seeing in my GIF there of it's really about how high or how low, but there's always some sort of sound on. It's never the sound off and the sound on. It's what's the volume of automation in each of these. So let's say that we've got a digital tech touch segment. Automation is going to be really loud there, and we're going to need technology to be able to probably do digital onboarding, and maybe we have digital touch points, and we intervene with our team at the right time when the customer needs it, but we need a strategy and a technology to be able to support that. Whereas in the higher touch model, you may have more touch points with executive buyers. These probably have a higher ARR that's tied to them, But that doesn't mean there's no automation. We still want to improve the efficiency of those CSMs that are working within those higher segments, and there's an opportunity to do that. This image, this segmentation strategy example, is from TSIA, Technology and Services Industry Association, an association that I reference quite a bit in these in our webinars. This is a blog post on how to scale customer success. So if anybody who's looking for some articles and content, TSIA always have a wealth of resources to be able to peruse and use as you're researching and figuring out your strategy. So here's where we get tactical of how do you get started? Because what I've presented so far is really what's happening within our space today. We all know we need to do this, but how are we actually going to do it? And this is the hard part, because even with this framework that I present with you, you all have different things that are happening within your organizations or politics or humans getting together and collaborating, all that can present blockers that we still have to figure out how to work through those. But hopefully this, at least this framework and focus, helps you get started and moving in the right direction. So the first thing that we'd want to do when we're considering that, we know that we need to leverage technology to add automation to make our teams more efficient. The first thing that is in my suggestion of a framework is to review your customer journey. So quite often I've seen customers that actually don't have this written out of here's the stages that our customers go through. Here are the core activities that our team would complete in each of these. Here's the outcomes that they need to achieve in order to move into the next stage. So this is get into a conference room or do a virtual session, do a Excel sheet or a Miro board to document out all of the stages, aligning the core activities that your team does today. So you want to document in current state. And you would do this for each segment because the segments might be a little bit different. So you may start with like the most common segment where most of your customers are, and then do copy out versions to say, well, this is the same for enterprise, but this is tweaked or a little bit different. And then all is going to depend on what your segments look like. Segments for everyone doesn't have segments around ARR. Some have segments around ARR and verticals and different product lines and so forth. So the way you organize this is going to be very dependent on your business, but the most important activity is to be able to document that customer journey, looking at the different lifecycle stages, key activities, and outcomes that you'd want to achieve in each. And again, I would encourage you to document what is the current state today, what happens today. The next thing would be to look at each of those stages, the aligned activities, and what are your opportunities for improvement? So what is the team doing today that actually is a possible automation opportunity? So maybe today in the adoption phase, they're trying to get an EBR scheduled for with an executive sponsor every 6 months. They're emailing, there's not consistent around when that happens. So highlight that. That's an opportunity. You don't need to figure out what the solution is. You just need to highlight what are the opportunities. But very important that you do also evaluate, and this is where this intention comes into play, what are the things you do not want to automate? So we still want to have these, what I refer to as magical moments with your customers, these opportunities to make a connection, have a high impact experience with the customer. And you don't want to over automate and take those away. So if there are any of those moments across your customer journey, you want to highlight those, put a box around them and say, nope, this needs to be this type of experience for this reason. And so there's not really capabilities to automate that, but maybe there's automation opportunities around it. You also want to identify your stage outcomes. So in each of your life cycle stages, what are you hoping the customer achieves? In the onboarding phase, we need to ensure that the admin gets their certification. We need to ensure that they log into our training site. We need to ensure they do X, Y, or Z in the product. Think about the things that they need to achieve in each of those stages, because that also can help you think about any automation that could go around ensuring the team knows that those things are happening. Quite often, those will turn into milestones for us within our customer journey. So most importantly, identify what you should and not automate. This is where you can become really intentional with your approach. The third step is to align your data. And probably one of the hardest things one of the areas that I see customers struggle the most with is, you may come up with this fantastic idea that you want to automate, but you don't have the data to back it up, or you know that it's there, but you don't have access to it, or you're not sure who has access to it. So I see this a lot of, we could automate, usage reports to customers. So instead of having the team get on the phone and tell them what their adoption looks like, we could automate this to them on a monthly basis. In order to do that, you need usage data to align to that automation. And maybe you have it, but it's not the right, or it's not formatted. So we need to look at where are you at with each of those, and probably look at what you actually can bring to life and create a plan. So not saying that you can't do those ones you don't have data for, but identify or start with your low-hanging fruit of what you do have data for, and then put in a plan of action into place of what should I do, or when could I do these things, because I need to do X, Y, and Z before we're ready to do it. And lastly, the step 4 of the framework is, once you have put things into place, it's really important to first identify how you're going to assess that it's working. So when I put this automation in place, how do I know the impact that it's having on the team? Is it that we've now saved time? Well, how much time have you saved? Is it we've now improved the customer experience because they have adoption data in their inbox every month? Is that impacting your NPS, your CSAT scores? Is it allowing the team to be more proactive with risk? What is it? How will you know that that's having some sort of impact? And you want to continuously improve. So implement some sort of process that will allow you to say, we implemented this, these are the results, this is what worked, or this is what didn't work. And if something didn't work, evaluate it to evaluate a change. How could we make it better? How could we achieve the results we set out to achieve? Maybe it's something we have to do that's completely different. So you want to have something to keep evaluating. Step 4, I think, is hard. I think just given how quickly we move in tech, and we're all in back-to-back meetings every day, the last thing we're thinking about is, how can I make what I put into place better? Typically, we're saying, yay, we got there and we achieved it. So let's move on to the next thing. So taking the time, though, can just make us better. It can make our teams better. It can make us more impactful as an organization. Any questions or comments around this framework or what I've shared so far in the webinar? And Grace, anything from your end and your monitoring chat?
Nothing in chat yet, but you guys feel free to either pop off mute or put something in chat.
All right. I don't hear anyone or see anyone, so I will keep moving. Now that we have a framework in place, let's talk through what are some automation capabilities. Like, when we say automation, Kate, what do you mean? What could I do? What are some examples? And I think these examples are helpful because it allows you to get the gears churning of what's the art of possible when we say this. And this is the area that at the beginning of the presentation, I said, we're going to see some examples. These are very geared towards Gainsight customers. But again, anyone who's not a Gainsight customer, I want you to think about what I present as an opportunity, and then think about the tech stack you are using and what solutions could be, because there is a very similar solution that's out there, whether you're using Gainsight or not. So I've broken this down into two different life cycle stages, knowing that one of the first thing I suggested is that we should go through and we should document the customer life cycle. So first going through each of those life cycle stages, what are the activities that the team is doing? What are the outcomes we want to achieve within each of those? And then start to evaluate things for automation. So let's say we went through onboarding and we've highlighted things we think that are as an opportunity for automation. So we have an activity, CSM sends a personalized introduction email to the customer. Customer just signs, opportunity moves to close one. CSM wants to introduce himself. This is a low-hanging fruit automation capability for not doing this today. And one that I see customers wanting to do off the bat, so it's one I like to get started with. An easy solution is to start leveraging things like Journey Orchestrator in Gainsight and or any other tool you're using to scale communications to be able to send a personalized communication to customers. It could be branded. It could have the CSM's picture. There's a lot of ways you can tokenize some content given the tool that you're using. But one thing that I like to see is adding the personal touch. So just because we're automating doesn't mean that we can't make it personalized. If you're a Gainsight customer, you could be adding, personal facts or fun facts about the CSM in the user object and tokenize those into an automated email. And so that's one way that you could say, here's some things about me. Live in Buffalo, New York. I have 3 children. I love to read romance novels, whatever it is, giving, your industry specific flavor. Maybe that's not going into what you're reading on a day-to-day basis isn't something you'd want to share, but something like that. My passion area in customer success. So that's one way you could go about to add in, but still give it that personal touch, but the team doesn't have to do that. They can just add, we can store that information, update it a few times a year and be able to automate. CSMs spend lots of time trying to understand customer goals and what's the value they want to get from the product. And this is so important, right? We probably need to be doing more of this in some way, shape, or form as a CS organization, because if your customer is getting value, they're going to renew and possibly expand. So it should be a key activity and one that we need to see more of. We could leverage Journey Orchestrator again for Gainsight customers to send a pre-onboarding email that's an intake survey. So before they get started, maybe this is even linked in the welcome email. It's, please take this survey to help us get started and be a catalyst to our work together. The customer could then respond to the survey. What are the goals they want to achieve? 1, 2, 3. I want to get this value from the product. Those survey results could then auto-populate fields within a success plan that the CSM could start to drive forward. And then that keeps getting translated into the plans across the customer lifecycle. Now you may say, Kate, it would be great if we get that from the sales team. Yes. If we could also try to improve onboarding from sales to the onboarding team or a CSM, also a win. Whatever it may be, whether it's coming from the sales team or the customer, a way to automate this information so that I'm not saying, hey, Grace, can we set up 30 minutes? I want to pick your brain about this customer, or even be repetitive and asking the customer the same questions again. And then it's documented. And there is also a scalability to that to be able to automate responses into the success plan to drive it forward. 2 other examples is to be able to, automate a welcome email, which we talked about a little bit. Sometimes CSMs are still doing a lot of learning, like product demo sessions, trying to teach customers about the tool. And we're seeing a lot of this, especially with, LMS integrations into different systems, being able to tie, We need to enroll a customer in a learning path and ensure they achieved a certain level of learning before they can move on in a life cycle stage. So some automation capabilities here would be able to, if there is the capability around an LMS, identifying a way to connect these and be able to onboard the customer through an LMS instead of having the CSMs do that or a role within the team. You also could start to see more in-app guided engagements as an optimal customer experience, and also letting the customer choose what they want to do. So I want to learn on my own because that's the way that I learn best. So if you send me a survey and allow me to elect into that path, I can go in and complete the things I want to complete, maybe go to a more scalable approach to get a question answered in an office hours session you're holding without having to meet one-on-one with somebody on the team for the product or service that I'm using. This is definitely not an exhaustive list, just trying to, again, get the gears churning around. When we say lifecycle automation, what do we mean? Let's take a look at one more example of a customer lifecycle stage and aligned activities. The opportunity being, here's what the team does today. So first thing, CSM needs to coordinate that EBR. We know that in a certain segment, we want to have this high touch experience. We want to show that executive buyer the value they're getting, the outcomes they're achieving, what their experience has been so far to ensure we're moving. The needle is pointed in the right direction for renewal and expansion. So the CSM needs to coordinate that and try to find a convenient time to meet. How many of you spend so much time that are customer facing, spend so much time trying to find a time that works with everyone's calendar? It is an art form to be able to look at calendars and find a time that will work for everyone. So a solution here for automation is to be able to automate the process of scheduling the EBR by putting it with a customer. So sending a email so many days before we know that they need to schedule an EBR. If we've tracked the last one they've done and they need to do one every 90 days, we should be able to work off of that data point. And then include a tokenized link to the CSM's online calendar booking system. I use the Google appointment calendar. Some people use Calendly. Whatever it is, you could take each of your CSM's calendar links, store those again in the user profile, and then tokenize that within the email template that you send out via Journey Orchestrator. This allows, one, CSM didn't have to send anything. They didn't have to think about when they were sending it. We're going to automate it. And then if we get that meeting booked, maybe we track when it's been booked. We can maybe set some reminders to go off of that as well. We're seeing this as definitely one we suggest quite a bit, and one that customers are aligning within their strategy. Mainly because no one wants to go back and forth via email to try to find a time that you conveniently can meet. CSMs translate handwritten notes from customer meetings to timeline. I just got off another session where we're working with new Gainsight customers that are just getting started with Gainsight. And somebody said, I'm so excited to get my team out of Google Docs, right? This is where we're taking notes today. So getting them just into timeline seems like such a big win. But I think we take it even further. And this is definitely where we're seeing capabilities like AI come into play. And I think we'll see more and more of this. But no longer do we want to have the team, handwritten notes, and then the team member saying, I just like my pen and paper, and that's the way I want to do it. Well, at some point, it's got to get into a system so everybody knows what's happening. So how can we add automation to this? In Gainsight, there's a Zoom integration with Gainsight. So CSM, we could have that Zoom integration set up. They could be taking notes in Zoom into timeline during the call. So there's no translation that has to happen. To me, this is just setting up an integration. You don't really have to do a ton more than that to make the team more efficient in this process. If they've logged their notes to timeline, there's also an email capability that would allow them to send an email from those timeline notes, which would allow them to, again, not have to go back and regurgitate everything that was discussed if they took notes in the Zoom integration, and then they logged that, then use those notes to send the email. You can make a few tweaks or changes. I'm sure that that is time saved between those things. Most importantly, though, for anybody who's a Gong customer, and I just did big jazz hands if you saw me in my video, but obviously don't have my video. For that reason, for all the jazz hands that you would see, the Gong AI analysis tool that was just released. So if you do use Gong, one, there's integration to bring those Gong recordings in, but now an AI capability to analyze the Gong recording. It will auto log your notes. It will tie a sentiment to it. So there is so much efficiency and time saved around this capability as well. Moving on, CSM receives a CTA or a playbook when a support ticket is escalated. I see many customers say they want this, right? All right, there's something happening in support. So the CSM needs to get flagged. They need to be made aware. This is where we have to also evaluate, like, should the CSM be doing that? Are we just making them aware? If we're just making them aware of it, we probably could do something more of like an email notification rather than a CTA. But also, we're just seeing such a shift in the support organizations with AI functionality of not just triggering off of individual support tickets and trying to figure out, like, when should we trigger something. There's a lot of AI functionality now that will do overall sentiment analysis on language that is being used within the tickets, the email bodies. It can predict when we think somebody's going to be a churn risk. They can predict when we think something is likely to escalate. You're working off of the AI analysis tools that are out there, and I think we're just going to see more and more of this. That's when we probably want to automate a CTA. If the AI engine that's looking at support tickets can tell us this customer is likely to churn, absolutely, we should trigger a CTA risk that's likely to churn given the experience within support. And that's when we'd want to have that human intervention. Two more. CSMs review either a 360, customer 360, or a dashboard. They can start to see adoption data, who has low adoption. Maybe they create CTAs to take action. This is where, I think what you see in the left-hand side is a great crawl approach for customers that maybe don't have the integration of usage data into their tech stack today, which happens and is prevalent. For those that do have it and have it aligned, we want to be able to take action, but maybe it doesn't need to be the CSM who's doing that. So this is where we could think about that dial that I showed you of, like, which segment could we start to leverage, possibly pulling customers into journeys based on low adoption behavior. Customer hasn't logged in 60 days. And we know that customers, if they don't log in monthly, they're more likely to churn. We could pull them into a journey with a communication about how to get back logged in and what value they could get from using it and how to get started. And we could start to feed them information to try to drive the behaviors that we want. So this is this concept of, like, options for intervention, either presenting them with stuff or even in that email saying, click here to schedule time with somebody in our team to walk you through how to get started. Have them choose, give them the path to choose or the power to choose. The last example I have here is pulling together content for an EBR. This takes a lot of time and effort. I think it's another area where we'll start to see more features and functionalities just because of the effort, but the importance of being able to showcase the value that somebody's getting from your product or service. And that has to be important and be shared within these executive business reviews, especially to a decision maker. So within Gainsight, many customers are utilizing success snapshots to be able to tokenize information into a deck automatically that they could download and pull. I think they still have to tweak or change it here or there. We just had a customer that set this up, and with I believe that their hours, it was about like 4 hours for every customer that they saved just by getting one data aligned, these decks created, and the download. Because before they would have to go into lots of different systems, create the deck, they didn't know which deck to use. So just by way of having it within Gains was really powerful. The other thing is get feedback from your customers before the executive business review and align that to the deck. So what outcomes do they feel that they have achieved this quarter? What is their satisfaction with your product or service? Ask them those questions ahead of time and then tokenize that into those EBR decks.
Hey, Kate.
Yeah.
We had one question that kind of lined up with that back when you were talking about, gathering those business outcomes from the customer ahead of time from onboarding. And so the question was, what type of language would you recommend using so they don't feel like that there's something that isn't being passed on or communicated from the sales team to the CSM? Is there something that you would recommend there?
Yeah. So it's a great question. Now, if we did already gather the information, we could do a confirmation of outcomes. So let's say that the sales team has documented the 3 outcomes that they want to focus on. And many companies will have like a framework of here's our value proposition, the 5 outcomes customers can achieve. And the sales team would go in and say, well, these are the top 3, and they document that. We could have the customer confirm that. So tokenize the 3 outcomes that they chose and say, I want to make sure we're set up for success for a kickoff call during the sales process. These are the 3 outcomes that we documented are going to be of value. What I love about that is it showcases that you're all talking to each other. Click here to complete this survey to confirm and or add and or tweak anything related to these outcomes. I don't know, I would use all of those words, but you get the general sense. Then allow them to maybe add more or make some tweaks from that. And I think you could do a similar approach in language of, we realize some things change between sale to where we are now. We want to ensure we have the right information. Take 3 to 5 minutes to complete this survey to ensure we have the most timely and accurate information. If for some reason you don't have what I said in the former, right, between your sales team and the organization, you could use that, I think, as a way to communicate of, I want to confirm and make sure there hasn't been any changes.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of the ways that I put it as well. And I think that even just like with Gainsight, right? They have their 4 pillars, right? Of what they're trying to achieve, what you're trying to achieve using Gainsight, right? So if you aren't gathering that in the sales process, I would recommend doing it. And if that's something that you just don't see anything happening in the near future, just documenting what are those core KPI or outcomes that most clients are trying to achieve, and just having that and be like, can you confirm, which of these are top of mind for you? So I like that approach.
Love it. All right. So we could go on and on with that, right? Each of those life cycle stages. We're going to look at this workbook that we have that you can download from our website to help you do the life cycle activity mapping and highlighting. Could we do this as an automation? And then here's the fun. I mean, this is the fun part I love is, what are the solutions? What's the art of possible that we could do of really challenging ourselves and our team to think outside the box? You may say, well, our customers will never do that, or they won't like that. You don't know until you try. So piloting also for some of these might be helpful, just given where maybe your culture is within your team of thinking about trying to do scaling with technology. In my framework, my last point was around this concept of like, we need to continuously improve. So after you put all of those wonderful automations in place, you want to document what's the impact that this has had, what's the time save, what's that quantitative or maybe qualitative note of like, what's the achievement? And then is it working? Did we achieve what we set out to achieve? There is a continuous improvement model out there called Plan, Do, Study, Act. And I like this framework because I think it's very applicable to tech and being able to easily understand and have a process around being able to continuously improve. So the cycle starts with this planning stage, which is what you would do with what I had in the first phase of the framework of identify what you're going to do. What's the success factor? How do we know that this is going to be successful? Identify, like, how are you going to make that happen? What are we going to do within the system or systems to bring that to life? That's your plan. Then we do the thing. We put it into action. We build the Journey Orchestrator program with a pilot program. We send out that welcome email or the survey, whatever it may be, we do that. Then we study it. I'm using quotes, study it. We review it. Did we achieve those success factors? What were our outcomes we were hoping to achieve? Did we have any problems or areas for improvement? And it's fair to say, like, not everything is going to go as planned. So you may have the best laid plan and feel so proud of it, and then nobody responds to it. So that's a moment to say, here's what we tried. Let's come back to the table. Let's evaluate, is there something different we could do? Could we incentivize it? Was the timing off? Did we not send it to the right people? So study it, evaluate it, identify how could you make it better, and then act on those. How can we make it better? So integrate what you learned into a plan, and then you keep cycling around. Now, at some point, you'll probably stop cycling around in some of these different automations because they'll be working. But taking the time to be able to document and do this is really important, and something you'll see within this workbook that we've developed to be able to make plans of how you're going to operationalize these. Getting started. The thing that you all are waiting for is, we talked about, why we're here, why it's prevalent in tech today, just this concept of adding automation. We all need to scale and make our teams more efficient. And then how we get started, we went through that 4-step framework. We looked at some possible automation examples. Now it's time to get started. So we have developed this workbook. We call it the Automation Opportunities Worksheet. And I'm going to show you a few screenshots, and then I'm going to give you a QR code of where you can go to download it from our website. This should help you do everything that we discussed today. So what you're looking at is the help guide that's going to be on the first tab of the workbook. The first thing is that you're going to do your life cycle mapping. And that's what you're seeing here in this automation planning example. Now, this isn't fully fleshed out. It's just one example per row. But on the first life cycle mapping tab, you're going to identify a segment that you're going to focus on. You're going to identify your different stages across your life cycle. You're going to start to document what are the different activities that our team does. Those are your aligned activities. What are the outcomes that you want to achieve? You want them to be ready for onboarding. You want them to be trained. You want them to log into the product, whatever those may be. Those are your moments of truth. And then you'll start to evaluate, when you look at those aligned activities, what are things we could automate? Well, if we do a kickoff meeting, we probably could automate this welcome email. We don't need somebody to manually send that anymore. And you'll start to go through and evaluate some automation opportunities for each of those phases. That's the first tab. The second tab is being able to create an operational plan of, okay, we know we're going to do this automation opportunity. Now let's plan for it. Let's do it. Let's study it. Let's make it better. This is where we've aligned that plan, do, study, act framework into an operational workflow for you. Let's say that we wanted to automate renewal notifications within the renew and expand phase. Everything that we have here, we have it aligned to the plan, do, study, act. So within the plan phase, what's the planned automation? What's the description? What are the data sources? How will we build it? Who's the impacted users? What's the priority and who's the owner? That's all of our planning fields. Then we need to do it. So when are we going to release it? What's the release plan? What are the notes or the results from the release? We study it. What's the impact that we've had on it? What's the improvements we need to make? And then what's our next step for act, if anything? What's the next thing we need to do? And you would do this, basically this operational planning for each of them. That tab is called the Plan, Do, Study, Act tab. So this first tab is a help guide. Second tab is where you'll be able to actually do the automation planning with your life cycle. The third tab is the Plan, Do, Study, Act. This is more operational planning. The the automation planning where you do your life cycle, this is a tab that we've created. You probably will tweak and change this every organization. And I've done this consulting with customers. So I've done this exact activity with many customers. And for each one, we've tweaked it for certain reasons. But primarily we've used this and it's worked well. And I've done multiple sessions with customers where we sit down and we go through phase by phase. What's the activities the CSM does in the onboarding phase? What's the activities the CSM does in the adopt phase, and so forth. Really important, and the advice that I'd give you here is document what you do today. Because we all want to know, we all have these ideas of like, but we could be doing this, but we should be doing this. Document what it is today. Probably add some notes sections to the right of these columns to write anything that is like, I got to come back to that note. Then start to identify like, what are improvements we need to make and where could we automate down here at the bottom. And again, you'd want to do this for each segment. You probably will start with one and then copy it out for others. You can make a copy and then just take away things or adjust or add to, depending on what the segment is. So what are you waiting for? Let's get to it and get started by going to download your automation workbook. That QR code, you can scan it with your phone, and that will bring you to our website, and then you can kind of email yourself the link if you want to do it on your laptop. But that will allow you to download the form that I'm talking about and use that to start to get started. So actually, I'm also going to show you the live example. I just want, can somebody confirm that you can see the Excel doc?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So this is that help guide that I was talking about. So you have just instructions, and we have this all descriptions here at the top of what you would do. You've got your automation planning tab on the second tab. You've got that Plan, Do, Study, Act. Now, one thing I will note is that automation opportunities that you put here will auto-populate here into columns A and B. So there is some automation there if that catches you off guard, but that's there. I do want to explain this last tab. So we didn't talk about this today. We actually talked about it in the last webinar on operationalizing outcomes. But if you are also evaluating like, what are the activities my team is doing or our CS organization is doing? Maybe you're actually not to the point where you can start to do that life cycle activity mapping. And you want to evaluate like, what is the team doing and why? You could do an activity like using an Eisenhower matrix, which is what you're seeing here, which is like a time and input categorization for team members to be able to say, here are all of the things that I'm doing. And I list them out in this list. And then I categorize them by the importance and the urgency. This would allow us, if you had, I like this too for smaller teams because it's very a qualitative hands-on exercise to be able to go in to be able to say, oh, you're doing this thing that you say is important and urgent, but it's actually not something I need you spending time on. That should go in the not important, delete or delegate. And it allows you to, one, recategorize, but also look at what is the team feeling is important? Where are they spending their time? So I have this here just as another option for anyone that's trying just to, focus on getting your team to focus on what's important and urgent is really what we want to see. We want them to focus on those things that matter. If we go back to the Harvard Business Review article that I talked through at the beginning of the webinar. So another tool in your toolbox for anybody that maybe is at this phase. If you've never done activities like this before, also reach out to us. This is part of our consulting activities that we do with customer success organizations is to come in and do evaluations like this for your team to help you get started and get planning with what this is going to look like and what your tech stack is going to look like. Remember, this doesn't have to be just Gainsight, it could be tech agnostic. All right, if anyone has any issues downloading that from the website, please feel free to reach out to Grace and we will help you get a copy over to yourself. So we have a few minutes to spare, and I want to start by opening a discussion around just your initial impressions of the automation planning document and the activity that we went through. How do you perceive its potential impact on your organization if you think it's something that would be relevant for you? And feel free, this is the point where we can come off of mute and chat back and forth. Any initial impressions or thoughts about the activity?
Hey, Kate, this is Hark.
Hello, how are you?
Good, how are you doing?
Good.
A question. So in our world, our CSMs are traditionally engaged or introduced to the client shortly before go live or shortly after go live. So the net new sales team takes them all the way to go live. And so in those introductions, it's usually a handoff, sort of introduction over a video call or a conference call of some sort. How would you shape the intro email through Gainsight, the automation, any different than, hey, I'm your new CSM, you don't know me, but here's about me and all that kind of stuff? It would be different because they've already been introduced via a call and not an email. So would the email be any different other than like adding the about me piece?
Yeah, I think that I would probably make it more about one, if they've already had a touch point, I think you can note that, like, it was great meeting you, or I'm glad we were able to touch base. It also could be more of like a congratulations to getting on this milestone of the go live. I'm excited to continue to work with you. Here's a little bit about me. Here's how we'll work together. So I think you could go off of like milestones or the experience they just had and reference that, whether it be a congratulations around the milestone that was achieved, and I'm using lowercase milestone, insert whatever that was, and or actually reference that they've had the call, because you could automate it to go out right after that call is logged or something like that.
Okay, that's fair. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Who else has an item that they want to bring up or discuss related to this topic? I've wowed you all with so much content and examples. You're like, hey, my brain is full. I have nothing else to say. All right. Well, if that is the case, I just wanted to end with some key takeaways to try to, just wrap our heads around what we discussed, because we discussed a lot. First thing is, remember, automation is segment agnostic, the phrase for this year, and that you should have automation in every one of your segments. Is just really how loud it is and what that approach is for the different customers that you're working with. Be purposeful and strategic in the implementation of automation. Don't try to automate everything. Don't not use automation. Try to identify, even maybe focusing on what are the core outcomes you're trying to achieve, and lean into some of those outcomes of, we're really going to try to automate this because we feel like the team is spending a lot of time here and can be really impactful for the team, but also for our outcomes as an overall organization. Identify low-hanging fruit, meaning what are the things that you've got data for, that you've got the capabilities for, that you know how to do. Start with those things first. And remember to continuously improve, leveraging that plan, do, study, act model. You've got a great framework within that document to also use within your operational planning. I'm here. If you have questions, feel free to reach out. Grace will send a copy of the recording as well as a PDF copy of the deck. Feel free to reach out if you have any issues, one, with downloading that document, or you want to set up some consulting time with us as well, we're more than happy to dialogue about the options around that. And I wish you all lots of success in getting automation up and running within your customer life cycles. Thank you so much for joining.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.